startups of the future are going to also focus on families, traditions. As we live apart, we also want to live together. So healthcare, looking after older parents, but not being able to travel to them or not living with them, what do you do? I think the startups of the future are going to look at this particular area also.
Talking about startups today, so startups is a buzzword which we have been hearing since last almost a decade now, and startups are evolving in every city now in India. So startups are the future, and all the established businesses, they are taking over, right from the business model to the valuations they have gone up to. So I see in future the education and gaming is becoming the next buzzwords, which will be completely taken over by a lot of startups with very unique business ideas.
The world is our oyster, the future of business for India and UAE. India and the UAE, which is celebrating the 50th year of its formation, share bonds in trade that go back centuries. The relationship has blossomed into a multi-faceted and successful comprehensive strategic partnership. Pillars of the India-UAE partnership include banking, investments and startups, and Indian expatriates in the UAE provide a strong platform for a more resilient future. India attracted its highest ever annual FDI inflow of $81.72 billion during the financial year 2020-21, an increase of 10% over the previous financial year. The UAE Sovereign Wealth Funds, Mubadala, and the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority together invested $4.12 billion into India last year. At the same time, future business should ensure due consideration of environmental, social, and corporate governance, the ESG factors, and promote positive societal impact, corporate responsibility, and long-term financial returns. The future holds unbridled potential. Our panel of business leaders look at the road ahead. Mr. Sunil Vitil, Regional Head of Global Trade and Receivables Finance, Middle East, North Africa and Turkey, HSBC. Sunil and his team facilitate over $65 billion in trade, commodity and supply chain financing every year for over 4,000 customers based in the region. They are currently focused on closing the trade finance gap through next-generation digital financing initiatives. Dr. Aman Puri assumed charge as Consul General of India, Dubai in July 2020. He is a member of the Indian Foreign Service, having joined in 2003. His overseas assignments include serving as the Consul General of India, Birmingham, UK, and at the Indian Mission to the European Union, Belgium and Luxembourg, based at Brussels. Sridhar Bavera, CEO, BMR Innovations, the management tech consulting firm. Author and leadership expert, Sridhar is an alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad and a senior corporate executive. He's also the author of the leadership bestseller, Moment of Signal, a contributor to Forbes and a leadership expert and motivational speaker at elite organizations. Ms. Elena Premikiri is the Head Environment, Social and Governance, VFS Global. Alina is a sustainability, CSR and overall ESG strategist with extensive experience on green banking products and services development, RES and energy efficiency projects, and environmental and social risk management, that's ESMS, of projects. An accomplished oral and written communicator, presenter and negotiator, skilled in building and strengthening cross-functional relationships with teams and customers, delivering cohesive and strategic operations. Bobby Bedi. Bobby Bedi is one of India's leading film producers and the founder of Content Flow Studios. He is notably known for his acclaimed films Bandit Queen, Bitter Chestnut and Kutch, and is widely experienced in the entertainment industry. Mr. Prashant Gulati. Mr. Prashant Gulati is an angel and early-stage investor in startups. Passionately involved with early-stage startups in India, Middle East and the US for more than a decade, Mr. Gulati spends a majority of his time helping build capacity for budding ecosystems. A serial entrepreneur, tech evangelist and startup mentor, Mr. Gulati has been associated with leading organizations like TIE, Indian Documentary Foundation, IBPC, Dubai Internet City, ADC Telecommunications, Beargain Technologies, TED, Communicate to and Mobile Monday in various capacities and roles. Be inspired. Festival of Ideas. The world is your oyster. Mr. Sunil Vitil, Dr. Aman Puri, Mr. Sridhar Bavera, Dr. Elena Primikiri, Bobby Bedi in conversation with Prashant Gulati.
So let me begin with the lady on the panel here. Elena, it's so surprising, when people talk about economy and we have somebody like you talking about ESG. So you do want to tell us more about what you do and how do you see business essentially using ESG as a part?
ESG is not something that you just tick the box and just do it on the side of your way that you operate your company. It's part of the operation of the company itself. It showcases the qualities that the company brings in. So in my perspective, it creates value. And that value goes to the shareholder value, right? So we need to make sure that we have all these elements that create positive impact to the companies that we operate, to the environment, the societies, all our stakeholders, the government, everything. It has to be taken into consideration, and to create a strategy, strong strategies that is aligned with the business strategy itself. And it's following that priorities that come from that. So in my perspective, environmental, social and governance aspects are very critical in all operations of companies. And we have 5 important pillars that we follow. The first one being contributing to sustainable economic growth. The second one is delivering good governance. So it has to do with compliance. You have to make sure that you follow all government transparency, integrity, everything that lies behind governance aspects. The third element is, of course, your people. How do you develop the skills of the people to deliver those goals that you have, the business goals? How do you manage to give them the skills to be able to, to perform the way they perform? And also, how do you incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender equality? I'm glad that today it's not a manel, it's a panel. So then, of course, you have the environment. So what you do for the environment? How do you engage in initiatives that promote good environmental behavior, promoting renewable energy in all aspects of it? And the third and the last pillar is about the society. How do you bring back value to the society? How do you contribute back? How do you do donations, volunteering activities? And also, how do you support local businesses and women-owned businesses? And so that overall gives the whole strategy that VFS Global has in place, and that's how we try to implement ESG into our operations.
Very good. Dr. Aman Puri, you have a very important role. You're the custodian of our relationship in Dubai. It's the second and the third. We're the second largest partner for UAE, and UAE is the third largest partner of Indian business, if you look at it from the other side. So maybe you want to share how we see this relationship blossoming.
I think this is truly a time when we can say that the India-UAE relationship is at a historic inflection point. Okay. Even today, we can say that the best is yet to come, and now we will see the exponential growth. With CEPA, of course, both countries are now committed to taking the pre-COVID trade of $60 billion to $100 billion in the next 5 years. And I don't think that is difficult to achieve, because we have clear direction. We know how we're going to increase the trade. We're looking at almost 80% of the goods coming in duty-free. The key sectors which will benefit are gems and jewelry, energy, and pharmaceuticals. But of course, there'll be several more. We're looking at trade and services over this period to grow to up to $15 billion. And of course, investment is a key part of this relationship. We announced earlier that both countries will facilitate investment of $75 billion from the UAE into India. And I think that is an area where we need to work more. Of course, there are very positive signs, including the fact that 2021 was a landmark year for India's innovation story. We saw the emergence of close to 44 unicorns. Today, we are almost at 90 unicorns in India. On ESG, I would like to mention one thing. There are companies like Tata Group, for example, one of India's most admired corporate brand, over 100 years of sustainability of the brand. And we all know about the extraordinary work which Tata Trust has been doing over the decades. And I think that is truly something which we can learn from, how for a corporate and its sustainability, making ESG an integral part of the way they do things is very critical.
So Bobby, this part of the world loves, Indian movies, and I'm sure you would be able to possibly give us an insight of how culture is the bridge that will make it even more sustainable in the long term to come.
You've touched upon actually a very critical element of the other bit of the discussion that's happened so far. You cannot do business, you cannot do big business without there being serious cultural connect. And I want to go centuries before that. I mean, most of us and most of our thinking has emerged from Central Asia. Actually, the Central Asian confluence is here. This is where most communities around celebrate and engage and entertain together. So I think it's critical that we look upon this, and now of late one is seeing an emergence of openness coming out of Saudi nearby. That also, I mean, it's never going to develop into exclusively Saudi. It is the region that is going to get influenced by that. And I think that it may become, if we make the right effort in this space, this could become the confluence of cultures that this region actually deserves, needs, and will end up sort of serving a much larger purpose and possibly therefore influencing the world market.
Sunil, coming to you, banks have been the mainstay of business in the sense they form the backbone. With India today globally leading in the fintech space, where supposedly the new way of doing, or moving money or looking at that is this. How do you see this blossoming, and how does it work so that we can get that innovation and make it as a part of the backbone that you guys do?
The three things that's really driving in the back, the big picture that's driving SEPA and the economic momentum that SEPA forecasts. So one is, according to HSBC research, in the next 10 years, India would be the third largest economy of $6 trillion. And that's almost doubling from where it is today. So we are 2.83 billion today, and we will be 6 billion.
6 trillion.
6 trillion, yeah. Sorry, 6 trillion in the next 10 years. Now that's an enormous moment. So where the exponential growth is coming from on SEPA. The second one is by 2030, India will be the largest population in the world. And one particular opportunity is 1/5 of the world youth would be based in India.
Wow.
Now that's a huge demographic dividend for whatever capital that you put in today. So you don't want to miss that opportunity. And the third one is the adaptability of the Indian, the nature of the Indians and the cultural adaptability of India. But one mind-boggling statistics is today India processes close to 26 billion real-time payments a year. We are 60% more than China. And we are 21 times more than US. That's 2,100% more than US.
UPI.
You can see the scale and the impact these adaptability and changes are bringing. So you have a population of youth, you have the digital adaptation that's really pushing the momentum through the economy. So we are excited from a trade perspective. There are two things that we are really excited, and as part of SEPA, and I think SEPA covers this really well. One is the high-skilled exports is actually growing faster than low-skilled exports in India. So what does that mean? High-skilled exports, when I talk about, is export of electronics, I mean high-end electronics, IT services, software consulting, pharmaceutical and healthcare, education. The high-skill part is growing faster than the low-skill, like textiles and apparels, agricultural products, white goods, etc. Now and the second one is the new age tech, to your question, and I think that is enormous. To Aman's previous point, the amount of investment that has gone in. Just last year, we had $20 billion going into India on startups. 50% of the FDI today is actually on startups. 7 years back, it was only 20%.
Correct.
So you could see the big picture of the young population and the digital infrastructure of the country with the investment that's coming in, and that is what we are excited about, and that SEPA covers that really well in terms of how to capture that between UAE and India.
Very good. You know, our last but not the least, Mr. Bibara, you bring in a completely different perspective. So maybe you want to tell people, like you have your books there, what prompted this? What made you do this?
I would like to bring a different dimension, that 3 important dimensions where what drives this entire effort, which is leadership, vision, and collaboration. Now, when we talk about leadership, there are various types of leaderships that we have already known with. But there are finite leadership and there is an infinite leadership. Infinite leadership is technically connected with the vision, which is always perpetuating the game, because you are not ever achieving that vision. That is why it is vision. Visions are not really achieved. They have to be relevant with the times. And they have to be always at the future of the times. That is why we are always aspiring to go there, reach there, and see the world that somebody has visioned already, or somebody has visioned that what this world could be in future, which is not that we could actually see it now. And inspire people to believe in this, the world that has been visioned. That is going to be collaborative, which will have culture, innovation, and sustainability are the main aspects. The excellence starts after 80%. The Pareto rule, if you talk about 80-20, you do not need to reinvent the cycle. You have already principles, technologies, methods, and benchmark practices everywhere in the world. So we don't want to waste time in reinventing the cycle. So we already have certain benchmarks, so we step on that and see what best we can actually thrive from that point. And that is the basic point of somebody's excelling. If you look at the vision of UAE for 2050, they are specifically talking about shared purpose with many countries, because your collaboration has to have the shared purpose. Because you have something, the other person has something else. And if you come together with a common purpose, or with a purpose that is shared, because the future generations have to be benefited out of this. If you're tampering with the organic setup and destroying the current only for the means of finite leadership, which is goals after goals after goals, just looking at the numbers, you have to look at the infinite leadership, which is going to help the future generations. And the unborn child has to feel the way you want it to feel now. We have to create an environment which is safer and has the basic amenities for the unborn child.
The treaty that we're talking about is actually collaboration. It's the biggest collaboration that I see, and I would like to ask you, Aman, to tell us, like, there are a few areas that I see which will probably have exponential increase from what our business mix has been, especially pharmaceuticals. It's unbelievable. Jewelry, it has always been. So maybe, tell us about, like, where you see education. There's this scope which is completely changed. The rules have been changed in my opinion.
Absolutely. The fact that we're now looking at setting up the first Indian Institute of Technology, the first foreign campus, so to say, in the UAE, it reflects the, mutual trust and the shared interests, long-term commitments which both countries share. And the common purpose is driving innovation. The UAE leadership here is very appreciative of the fact that the Indian community here in the UAE has contributed enormously in the socio-economic transformation of the UAE.
Okay.
And of course, they are very appreciative of the fact which Indian young innovators are playing globally. In fact, if you study the unicorns created in the United States, disproportionate number of the co-founders are Indian Americans.
Correct.
In my sense is we have close to 1/5 of young population in the world as of today, because we are a very young country, average age being 29. So even today we are close to that 1/5 of the youth, and they are obviously driving innovation, driving productivity, driving value creation. And in this high tech, in the industry 4.0, obviously the knowledge worker becomes a very key factor of production.
Correct.
And that's a differentiator, that's a competitive advantage we have. And I must say that, when you compare the first world and India, for example, the fact that our young people, they have to go through so much of struggle, because of demand and supply in terms of opportunities, that also becomes like a force multiplier.
Correct.
It kind of gets the best out of you. We talk about India becoming a $6 trillion economy. We talk about PwC saying that, by 2050 we'll be there. But let us not forget one thing. And here we are obviously talking about Festival of Ideas being inspired. So obviously we'll have to go a little bit back in history. Let's look at the last 20 centuries. If we look at the last 20 centuries, which economy was the major economy in the world for the majority of the period? That was India. So what we are seeing now actually is the re-emergence of a very important economy, a civilization which goes back to 5,000 to 7,000 years old, and of course, coming to culture. It is something about that land, which has been the fertile ground for the birth of 4 major world religions, for example. And that talks about the ability for creativity, ability for acceptance, ability for new ideas to take firm ground in that land. And coming to innovation and how SEPA will drive our relationship, the world is fully aware that India is the pharmacy of the world. We can produce generic drugs which are world-class at a fraction of the cost. And that is something which now we are realizing that here in the UAE, for example, we have several key stakeholders in the healthcare industry and the sector who are of Indian origin. And obviously all of them tell us that, to make healthcare more competitive in the UAE, to be able to serve patients from other parts of the, Middle East in this region, to be a viable healthcare tourism destination, we do need to bring in, affordability in terms of pharma products. And that is something which, so we're actually natural partners. There's very little where UAE and India compete with each other. We actually complement each other in many, many ways.
I want to ask you one question, which is, I think, the biggest bridge between India and the UAE, which is travel. And VFS and travel can't be too far away, correct?
That's correct.
So when do you see that coming back?
Everybody's looking forward to return to normal, whatever normal that is. But we see it coming up soon. I think 2022 and 2023 will be a year of really huge amounts of traveling, because a lot of people wanted to travel, you know, in the past years, just to see their families, friends, etc. Now it's becoming even more, you know, it's more of a need. Of course, let's not forget that during the traveling, when travel was banned, a good happened with the environment, right? So the levels of the carbon emissions have decreased. We have to take this into consideration. That doesn't mean that we should, you know, ban travel for all, but we need to find ways of innovative ways. But we need to find innovative ways. That's where, you know, we need to be inspired and find innovative ways of making sure that carbon emissions are not there from traveling. There are a lot of ways of tackling that. So I think that's what we should focus on.
Be inspired. Festival of Ideas. And innovation can change the world. All we need is passion, focus, and a desire to help. If you have an innovation, please send it to us at whatever stage it is in. Our panel of experts will assess it and help propel it towards reality. The sky is your limit. Don't wait. Mail us your idea or innovative thought at beinspired@teamworkarts.com.